"Sir, you need to leave first class immediately." The words cut through the cabin so sharply that conversations stopped mid-sentence. A woman near the window lowered her coffee. A businessman paused with his laptop half open. Even the soft hum of pre-flight boarding seemed to fade beneath the weight of what had just been said. Jordan Carter looked up slowly from seat 2A. 22 years old. Black hoodie. Dark jeans. White sneakers. Nothing about him matched what some people imagined first class should look like. The flight attendant standing over him, Nicole Harris, folded her arms and stared down at him with complete certainty. "You heard me," she said. "That seat isn't yours." Jordan blinked once and calmly held up his boarding pass. "Actually, it is." Nicole didn't even look at it. "Sir, don't make this difficult." Around them, passengers began exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed curious. Jordan remained seated, his posture relaxed despite the attention now gathering around him. The aircraft was scheduled to depart from Chicago to New York in less than 30 minutes. Most people were settling into their seats. Jordan had boarded early, just like his ticket allowed. He had said hello to the gate agent. He had scanned without issue. Everything had been normal until this moment. Nicole reached for the armrest beside him and pointed toward the rear of the aircraft. "Your seat is back there." Jordan glanced toward economy, then back at her. "No, it isn't." The tension in the cabin thickened. It felt less like an airplane and more like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. A man across the aisle quietly pulled out his phone. A woman in row 3 narrowed her eyes. Jordan could feel the attention settling on him from every direction, but his expression never changed. He had seen looks like this before. The assumption, the instant judgment, the certainty that he could not possibly belong. Nicole sighed dramatically and motioned for another crew member. Within seconds, Brian Walker approached. He looked at Jordan, then at the seat number, then back at Jordan again. The look on his face said everything. "What's the problem?" Brian asked. "Claims." "This is his seat," Nicole replied. A few passengers chuckled under their breath. Jordan sat quietly. Brian shook his head. "Buddy, first class is full. Let's not waste everyone's time." Jordan slowly lifted the boarding pass again. "You haven't even checked my ticket." Brian smirked. "I don't need to." The words landed harder than either crew member realized. Nearby passengers shifted in their seats. Something about the exchange felt wrong. The atmosphere had changed. What began as a routine boarding issue was turning into something else entirely. Jordan slipped his phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen. No panic. No anger. Just calm. Almost too calm. Nicole noticed and rolled her eyes. "Calling someone won't change anything." Jordan looked up at her. His voice remained steady. "You're right." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Jordan locked his phone and placed it on the armrest beside him. But what happens next is definitely going to change something. Neither Nicole nor Brian understood what he meant. Not yet. But somewhere beyond the cabin doors, events had already begun moving toward a conclusion none of them were prepared for. And within the next hour, everyone on that aircraft would learn the same lesson. The biggest mistake isn't judging someone by what they wear. It's deciding who they are before you know their name. 30 minutes earlier, nothing about the day seemed unusual. O'Hare International Airport moved with its usual rhythm, rolling suitcases crossing polished floors, departure announcements echoing overhead, travelers rushing toward gates with coffee cups in hand. Jordan Carter walked through Terminal 3 alone, carrying a small black backpack over one shoulder. No assistant, no security detail, no designer luggage. Anyone passing him would have assumed he was another college student heading home for the weekend. That was exactly how Jordan preferred it. At 22, he had spent most of his life watching people react differently the moment they learned his last name. The son of Marcus Carter, founder and chairman of Horizon Air Group, could have traveled on private jets whenever he wanted. Instead, he often chose commercial flights. His father believed there was value in seeing the world as it really was. Value in understanding how ordinary customers experienced the company. Jordan had heard that lesson since childhood. Never let privilege become a blindfold. Earlier that morning, Marcus had called from New York. The board meeting was scheduled for the next day. Jordan would be attending as one of the youngest voting members in company history. The opportunity carried responsibility, but Marcus never treated it like an entitlement. He expected preparation, discipline, humility. Jordan smiled as he remembered the conversation. His father had ended the call the same way he always did. Listen more than you speak. At the gate, boarding had gone smoothly. The agent scanned Jordan's pass. The screen flashed green. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Carter," she said with a polite smile. Jordan thanked her and stepped onto the jet bridge. The first-class cabin greeted him with soft lighting and quiet conversations. He located seat 2A, placed his backpack beneath the seat in front of him, and settled in. A flight attendant passed by and offered a quick welcome. Everything seemed normal. For several minutes, Jordan reviewed notes for the upcoming meeting, revenue reports, customer satisfaction metrics, expansion proposals. Horizon Air had grown into one of the largest carriers in the country, but Marcus often reminded the leadership team that growth meant nothing if customers felt unseen. Ironically, those words would soon prove more important than anyone realized. As boarding continued, a wealthy couple entered the cabin and stopped near Jordan's row. The husband glanced at the seat number, then at Jordan, then frowned. The look lasted only a second, but Jordan noticed it. He had spent years recognizing those moments. The silent calculations, the assumptions, the questions people asked themselves without speaking. The couple moved on, but something in the atmosphere shifted. Small, almost invisible, like the first distant cloud before a storm. A few minutes later, Nicole Harris emerged from the galley carrying a tablet. Her expression changed the instant she saw Jordan. Sitting in 2A, she looked at the seat assignment, then at Jordan, then back at the screen. Her pace slowed. Jordan barely noticed at first. He was focused on a presentation summary. But Nicole remained standing nearby longer than necessary, watching, evaluating, reaching a conclusion before asking a single question. The cabin remained calm. Passengers continued boarding. Overhead bins closed. Conversations drifted through the air. Yet somewhere beneath the ordinary sounds of departure, the first crack had already formed. Neither Jordan nor the passengers around him knew it yet, but the next few minutes would reveal far more than a seating dispute. They would reveal exactly how quickly appearances could become accusations when the wrong person decided someone did not belong. Nicole finally stepped closer to seat 2A and tapped her tablet with visible confidence. Whatever doubt might have existed a few moments earlier was gone. She had already decided what she believed. The facts no longer seemed important. "Sir, I am going to ask you one more time," she said. "Please gather your belongings and move to economy." Jordan looked up from his notes. Why? The question was simple, calm, direct. Yet Nicole appeared irritated by it. "Because that seat is not assigned to you." Jordan held up his boarding pass once again. "Then show me where the mistake is." For a brief moment, she hesitated. Not because she lacked authority, but because she had not actually checked. Brian noticed the pause and immediately stepped in. "Look, man, we are trying to help you avoid embarrassment." A few passengers turned toward the exchange. The wealthy couple who had entered earlier stopped several rows away. The husband adjusted his expensive watch while listening carefully. Nicole glanced toward them before returning her attention to Jordan. Something about that glance did not go unnoticed. "Who is assigned to this seat?" Jordan asked. Nicole ignored the question. "First-class passengers pay a premium to be here." Jordan nodded slowly. "I know. That is why I bought the ticket." A quiet murmur moved through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged looks. The answer was reasonable. Nicole's response was not. Instead of verifying the reservation, she crossed her arms and said, "People claim things all the time." The words hung in the air. Jordan studied her face. He had seen this pattern before. The assumption came first. The evidence came later, if it came at all. Across the aisle, a woman named Emily Ross looked up from her tablet. She was an attorney from Boston traveling home after a conference. At first, she had assumed there was a simple misunderstanding. Now she was no longer sure. "Has anyone actually scanned his boarding pass?" she asked. Nicole forced a smile. "Ma'am, we are handling the situation." Emily did not look convinced. Jordan remained seated, completely still. The calmness seemed to bother Brian even more than resistance would have. "You are holding up boarding," Brian said. Jordan glanced around the cabin. Passengers were still entering normally. Bags were still being stored. Nothing had stopped. Yet the accusation had already been made. "No," Jordan replied. "I think this conversation is what is holding things up." Several nearby passengers nodded slightly. Brian's jaw tightened. The wealthy couple began moving toward row 2. The husband pointed directly at Jordan's seat. "That is the one," he said quietly. Nicole immediately smiled at them. The difference was impossible to miss. Her voice softened. Her posture changed. Her entire demeanor shifted. "Welcome aboard," she said warmly. Then she turned back toward Jordan. The contrast felt like a spotlight illuminating everything that had remained unspoken. Jordan looked from Nicole to the couple and then back again. Suddenly the situation made more sense. This was never about a seating error. It was about who certain people expected to see in first class and who they did not. Emily noticed it too. So did several passengers nearby. The atmosphere inside the cabin changed again. What had begun as suspicion was becoming scrutiny. People were paying attention now. And the more attention the situation received, the harder it became for assumptions to hide behind procedure. The cabin had reached a strange crossroads. No one was shouting. No one was creating a scene. Yet the tension felt heavy enough to press against the walls of the aircraft. People had started choosing sides. Some passengers avoided eye contact and focused on their phones, eager for the situation to disappear. Others watched carefully, sensing that something important was unfolding in front of them. Emily Ross set her tablet aside completely. The attorney in her recognized a familiar pattern. Conclusions were being treated as facts. Assumptions were replacing verification. Across the aisle, a young flight attendant standing near the galley looked increasingly uncomfortable. Her name tag read Mia Thompson. She had joined Horizon less than 6 months earlier and was still learning the routines of commercial aviation. But she knew one thing with certainty. Procedures existed for a reason. And none of the procedures she had been taught looked anything like what was happening now. Mia quietly opened the crew seating chart on her handheld device. She checked row 2. Then she checked it again. Her eyes widened slightly. Seat 2A was assigned exactly as Jordan claimed. She looked toward Nicole, expecting a simple correction. Instead, she saw confidence. Confidence built on an assumption rather than information. Mia hesitated. Nicole was senior crew. Brian had been with the airline for years. Challenging either of them during boarding was not something new employees did lightly. Still, the screen in her hand remained unchanged. The name attached to seat 2A was clear. Jordan Carter. A few rows away, the wealthy couple remained standing near the front of the cabin. The husband leaned toward Nicole and spoke quietly. She nodded immediately. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it deepened the unease spreading through the cabin. Emily noticed it. So did several nearby passengers. Jordan noticed as well. Yet he remained remarkably calm. He sat with the patience of someone who understood that truth did not become stronger when spoken louder. Mia finally took a step forward. Her heart pounded. "Nicole," she said carefully, "I think there might be something you should verify." Nicole barely glanced at her. "We already know what is happening here." Mia swallowed. "Actually, I checked the assignment list." Brian immediately interrupted. "This is not your concern." The words landed like a closed door. Mia stopped speaking, but the doubt she had introduced remained in the air. Passengers heard it. Emily heard it. Jordan heard it. Suddenly, the certainty driving the situation no longer felt so certain. A businessman seated near row 4 lowered his newspaper. "If the seat is assigned to him, why are we still discussing this?" he asked. No one answered. Another passenger quietly nodded in agreement. The atmosphere shifted once more. The cabin was no longer watching Jordan. It was watching the crew. Every decision now carried weight. Every word invited scrutiny. And for the first time since the confrontation began, the people questioning what was happening outnumbered the people accepting it. The storm that had started with a simple assumption was beginning to gather witnesses. The moment Mia mentioned the assignment list, the balance inside the cabin shifted again. What should have been a routine verification suddenly became something far more uncomfortable. Nicole's expression hardened. Brian looked away for a moment before forcing a smile that failed to hide his frustration. The facts were beginning to push against the story they had already decided to believe. "The seating chart is not the issue," Nicole said sharply. "The issue is compliance." Jordan looked at her calmly. Compliance with what? Neither Nicole nor Brian answered directly. Instead, they repeated the same vague concerns. Questions without evidence. Accusations without verification. Around them, passengers listened more closely than ever. The businessman in row 4 folded his newspaper completely. Emily Ross crossed her arms. Even the wealthy couple near the front of the cabin appeared less confident now that people were openly questioning the crew's actions. Jordan glanced out the window beside him. Beyond the glass, airport vehicles moved beneath the afternoon sky. Everything outside remained ordinary. Inside the aircraft, however, something familiar was unfolding. Something he had experienced before. A memory surfaced from years earlier. Jordan had been 12 years old when his father took him on a business trip to Atlanta. They had stopped at an upscale hotel after a long day of meetings. Marcus Carter wore a simple polo shirt and jeans. Nothing flashy. Nothing that announced his status. Jordan remembered standing beside him as a front desk employee repeatedly questioned the reservation. Other guests checked in without delay. His father waited patiently, smiling, calm, refusing to become angry. Later that night, Jordan asked why he had not demanded better treatment. Marcus looked out the hotel window and gave an answer Jordan never forgot. The hardest thing in the world is staying calm when someone has already decided who you are. Jordan had carried those words with him ever since. Now, sitting in seat 2A, he understood them more than ever. Nicole suddenly turned toward the galley. "Perhaps we need additional assistance," she said. The phrase sounded professional, but everyone understood what it meant. The situation was escalating. Emily immediately spoke up. "Additional assistance for what exactly?" Nicole hesitated. For the first time, she seemed aware that dozens of eyes were evaluating every decision she made. Mia remained near the front of the cabin, still holding the device that clearly showed Jordan's name attached to the seat. She wanted to speak again. She wanted to point out the obvious. But the tension between experience and truth held her silent. Jordan looked toward her and offered a small nod. It was not fear she saw in his expression. It was patience. The kind of patience that comes from knowing the truth has a way of revealing itself eventually. The cabin grew quieter. The arguments were no longer convincing people. Questions were multiplying faster than answers. And while Nicole and Brian continued trying to defend a decision that made less sense by the minute, Jordan realized something important. This was no longer about a seat. It was about what happened when assumptions became authority. And the longer the situation continued, the harder it would be for anyone to pretend otherwise. The cabin had become unnaturally still. Even the routine sounds of boarding seemed distant now, drowned out by the growing awareness that something was wrong. Nicole and Brian continued standing near row 2, but their confidence no longer looked effortless. Too many people were watching. Too many questions had been asked. Jordan glanced at the time on his phone. The aircraft should have been preparing for departure. Instead, an entire cabin sat suspended between assumption and reality. He unlocked his phone and scrolled to a familiar contact. The name alone carried more weight than anyone around him realized. He pressed call. The line connected almost immediately. Jordan. The voice on the other end was calm, steady, unmistakably composed. Marcus Carter sounded exactly the way he always did. No panic, no frustration, just control. "I think we have a situation," Jordan said. Across the aisle, Emily noticed the call but could not hear the conversation. Nicole noticed too. Her eyes narrowed. "Calling someone is not going to change company policy," she said. Jordan listened as his father remained silent for a moment. Then Marcus asked a simple question. "Are you still in your assigned seat?" "Yes." "Good." Another pause followed. Jordan could almost picture his father sitting behind a conference table somewhere in Manhattan, absorbing information the same way he approached every challenge. Patiently, methodically. "Then stay where you are," Marcus said. "Do not argue. Do not explain. Let them continue." Jordan smiled faintly. The answer did not surprise him. It was exactly what he expected. Across the cabin, Nicole folded her arms. "Sir, if you are refusing crew instructions, this matter may become more serious." Jordan ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I understand," he replied. His calmness unsettled her even more. Most people became defensive when challenged. Most people tried to prove themselves. Jordan didn't either. Mia watched from the galley, increasingly uncomfortable. The seating chart still displayed the same information it had displayed 10 minutes earlier. Seat 2A belonged to Jordan Carter. The evidence had not changed. Only the willingness to acknowledge it had. Then something unexpected happened. Jordan's phone vibrated again. A message appeared on the screen. "Corporate compliance has been notified. Review initiated." He read it silently and locked the device. No announcement. No reaction. Yet the process had already begun. Hundreds of miles away, people whose job was to protect the airline's reputation were starting to examine what was happening aboard the aircraft. Emily noticed Jordan glance at the message and sensed a shift She could not quite explain. The confidence she saw in him was different now. Not arrogance. Certainty. Like someone who knew the next chapter before anyone else had reached the page. The cabin remained divided, but the momentum was changing. Questions were becoming evidence. Witnesses were becoming participants. And while Nicole and Brian still believed they controlled the situation, events beyond the aircraft doors had already started moving in a direction neither of them could stop. The message on Jordan's phone was only the beginning. Another notification appeared less than a minute later. Then another. Quietly. Efficiently. Invisible to everyone except him. Across the cabin, Nicole continued speaking with the certainty of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. Brian stood beside her, nodding along. Neither noticed that the foundation beneath their confidence was beginning to crack. Emily Ross did. Mia Thompson did. Several passengers did. The atmosphere had changed again. People were no longer questioning Jordan. They were questioning the people accusing him. Jordan slowly stood from seat 2A. The movement immediately captured everyone's attention. Conversation stopped. Even Nicole fell silent for a moment. Finally, Brian said, "You are ready to cooperate." Jordan looked directly at him. "Actually, I am ready to clarify something." The cabin became still. Jordan's voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. "You spent the last 20 minutes assuming I did not belong here." Nicole folded her arms. "Sir, this is not personal." Jordan glanced around the cabin. "That is interesting, because nobody verified my seat assignment. Nobody checked the information that was already available. Decisions were made before questions were asked. No one interrupted. Not even Nicole. For the first time, she seemed unsure whether she wanted him to continue. Jordan reached into his backpack and removed a slim leather portfolio. Inside were documents related to the board meeting awaiting him in New York. He placed the folder on the tray table beside him. Several passengers leaned forward. Emily noticed the Horizon Air corporate seal immediately. Mia did too. Jordan looked at Nicole. "Do you know why I am flying to New York today?" She did not answer. "I am attending a board meeting." Brian laughed nervously. "Anyone can say that." Jordan nodded. "That is true." He opened the folder and revealed the first page. Horizon Air Group Board of Directors. Jordan Carter. Voting member. The reaction was immediate. Emily's eyes widened. The businessman in row 4 lowered his glasses. Even the wealthy couple near the front of the cabin exchanged uncertain looks. Nicole stared at the document. Her expression changed, but only slightly. She still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Jordan continued. "That information alone should have been enough to make you pause." He closed the folder. "But it gets more interesting." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Mia felt her heart racing. She already suspected what was coming. Jordan looked toward the front of the aircraft before speaking again. "My name is Jordan Carter." Silence. "The same Carter whose name appears on this airline's annual reports." The silence deepened. "The same Carter whose family helped build this company." Nicole's confidence visibly faltered. Brian looked as if he wanted to say something, but could not find the words. Then Jordan delivered the final piece. The piece that changed everything. "Marcus Carter is my father." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words settled across the cabin like thunder arriving after a distant storm. "And my father is the majority owner of this airline." The look on Nicole's face vanished somewhere between disbelief and realization. Around the cabin, passengers stared in stunned silence. The assumptions that had fueled the entire confrontation were suddenly exposed. And for the first time since boarding began, nobody was questioning whether Jordan belonged in seat 2A. They were questioning how anyone could have believed he did not. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The cabin seemed frozen between disbelief and reality. Nicole stared at Jordan as though the words she had just heard refused to fit inside the story she had already written in her mind. Brian looked down at the floor. The wealthy couple near the front of the cabin suddenly found the view outside the window far more interesting than anything happening around them. Emily Ross slowly exhaled. The businessman in row 4 shook his head in disbelief. Mia Thompson stood motionless, still holding the device that had shown the truth from the beginning. Then Jordan's phone vibrated again. This time the message was impossible to ignore. "Corporate review team active. Executive oversight engaged." Within moments, Nicole's company tablet emitted a notification tone. Her expression shifted instantly. She opened the screen and read silently. The color drained from her face. Brian checked his own device and experienced the same reaction. Passengers noticed immediately. Whatever confidence had carried them through the confrontation was gone, replaced by uncertainty, replaced by consequences. Emily watched carefully as Nicole reread the message twice. "What is it?" Brian asked quietly. Nicole did not answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different. Smaller. "Corporate is requesting a full incident report." A murmur moved through the cabin. Jordan remained standing beside seat 2A, calm, unmoved. He had not raised his voice. He had not demanded special treatment. He had simply allowed the facts to arrive. Another notification appeared. Then another. The system was moving quickly now. Somewhere in New York, compliance officers, executive staff, and board representatives were reviewing records, timelines, and crew decisions. Every interaction was being documented. Every step was being examined. Mia's device vibrated as well. She opened the message and blinked in surprise. A request had arrived asking her to preserve all relevant information related to the boarding process. For the first time all afternoon, she felt relief. Someone was finally asking the right questions. Across the cabin, passengers began speaking openly. She told him he did not belong here. The seat was assigned to him the whole time. They never even checked. The comments spread from row to row. Not angry, just undeniable. The facts no longer belonged to one side of the conversation. They belonged to everyone. Nicole finally looked at Jordan. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding." The sentence landed heavily in the silence. Jordan met her eyes. "A misunderstanding happens after verification." Nobody responded, because everyone understood the difference. The cabin doors remained open. The aircraft had not left the gate. Yet the outcome of the situation had already changed completely. The people who once controlled the narrative were now answering for it. The witnesses who had quietly observed were now being heard. And as corporate oversight tightened around the unfolding review, one truth became impossible to escape. The problem had never been a seat assignment. The problem had been what certain people believed before they ever bothered to check the facts. The cabin remained quiet long after the notifications stopped appearing. It was the kind of silence that arrives when everyone realizes they have witnessed something bigger than the event itself. Jordan slowly returned to seat 2A and placed the leather portfolio back into his backpack. He did not look triumphant. He did not look angry. If anything, he looked disappointed. Across the aisle, Emily Ross studied him for a moment before speaking. "You stayed calm through all of that." Jordan smiled faintly. "My father taught me that losing your composure never improves the truth." Several passengers nodded. The statement seemed to settle over the cabin with the same weight as everything that had happened before it. A few minutes later, another message appeared on Nicole's device. She read it silently. Brian read his own. Neither spoke immediately. They no longer looked like people directing a situation. They looked like people reflecting on one. Mia's device chimed next. Her eyes widened. Corporate leadership had requested a follow-up conversation regarding her observations during boarding. For the first time that afternoon, she felt seen. Not because she had taken a side, but because she had chosen facts over assumptions. The cabin door finally closed. Boarding was complete. Yet nobody seemed eager to return to normal conversation. The experience lingered. The wealthy couple who had once expected to occupy row 2 remained unusually quiet. The businessman in row 4 returned to his newspaper, but turned very few pages. Even the passengers who had stayed silent throughout the confrontation appeared thoughtful. Jordan looked out the window as the aircraft slowly prepared for departure. The airport lights reflected against the glass. For a moment, he remembered the lesson his father had taught him years ago in that Atlanta hotel lobby. People will tell you who they are long before they tell you your seat number. Back then, Jordan had not fully understood. Now he did. His phone vibrated one final time. This message came directly from Marcus Carter. Only 7 words appeared on the screen. "Proud of you. See you tomorrow." Jordan smiled and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Across the country, a father already knew the most important outcome of the day had nothing to do with corporate reviews, board meetings, or company policies. It had everything to do with character. As the aircraft began moving away from the gate, Jordan looked around the cabin one last time. Then he spoke quietly enough that only a few nearby passengers could hear him. "The problem was never that you did not know who I was." Several heads turned toward him. Jordan's voice remained calm. "The problem was how you treated someone you thought did not matter." Nobody argued. Nobody could. Because every person aboard that flight knew the statement was true. The aircraft rolled toward the runway beneath the evening sky, carrying passengers to New York. Yet the lesson that traveled with them would reach much farther. Respect should not depend on a title. Dignity should not require proof. And the strongest form of power is not the ability to silence a room. It is the ability to remain calm while the truth speaks for itself. Jordan settled into seat 2A as the city lights faded behind the aircraft. He had not raised his voice. He had not demanded special treatment. He had simply refused to surrender the truth. And in the end, that had been more powerful than anything else in the cabin.